Hi, I'm Amber Johnson of Gigi's Thimble, and today I'm going to show you how to make this cute house block that I designed for my upcoming fabric collection with Riley Blake Designs called Feels Like Home. And this block is actually a lot easier than it looks. It's made up of 3 units: the paper pieced roof unit, the heart block that's traditionally pieced, and the traditionally pieced log cabin block. So let's talk about the pattern. This pattern has 3 different quilt blocks in it, and today we're going to focus on the house block. So first you're going to open up your pattern, and inside is a master copy of the roof units. There's 2 on a paper, and you will need to make 7 copies of this unit. Let's get started. First, you're going to take your foundation paper piecing roof unit and just cut it in half so you have 1 unit to work with. And with paper piecing, your fabric is actually going to go on the back side of your paper, but you're going to use the lines on the front side to show you where to sew. So first I want you to put your lined side down on your mat and just fold back the pieces on the lines to mark creases to show you where to place your fabric. These are just going to be used as guides. So we'll just mark the paper on all the lines. Luckily, there's just a few in this pattern. Okay. Now that we've marked everything, we're ready to start placing our fabric on the paper. One important tip with paper piecing is that you need to reduce the stitch length on your sewing machine. Smaller stitches will help perforate the paper when you sew the pieces on, and that will make the paper easier to remove later. So on my Bernina, I usually sew at a 2.5 stitch length. With paper piecing, I reduced that stitch length to a 1.5. And so let me do that really quick. Okay, my sewing machine is all set to go. And then we're gonna start sewing on our paper. But the first piece of fabric is actually glued on instead of stitched on. So I'm going to put a little dab of glue on the back side of my paper over section A1. Just put a little dab of glue, and then I'm going to grab my square for section A1, and I'm just going to glue it over the square. Adhere that in place, and I'm just lining up the raw edge of my fabric with the top edge of my paper piecing fabric. Then I'm going to flip the fabric over and fold back the paper on that line between section A1 and section A2. I already have a crease there, so it makes it really easy. I'm just going to grab my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch away from the fold of the paper, just to remove any excess fabric and to show me where to line up my next piece of fabric. So this raw edge between section A1 and A2 is where I'm going to line up the piece of fabric for section A2. So I've got my rectangle already cut. I'm going to line up the raw edges between section A1 and A2 and along the top edge of the paper. And now I'm just going to sandwich all of this, the paper and the fabric, between my 2 hands. Flip it over, take it to your sewing machine, stick it under the presser foot, and just carefully put it under your presser foot. You can take a little peek to make sure none of that fabric is folded under there, and you're going to put it under your presser foot and lower it. you're going to start sewing 1/4 of an inch before the line and end your stitches 1/4 of an inch after the line ends. You can lower your needle and start sewing. And then lift your needle up and remove the whole thing out from under your presser foot. And we're going to press this piece open. Okay, so we have pieces A1 and A2 all done. We're going to move on to section A3, and we're going to flip all of that over and fold the paper back on the line between section A2 and A3, and that just reveals the excess fabric that we need to trim. We'll trim it 1/4 inch away from the folded paper. That just reduces bulk and shows us where to line up our next piece. So we'll grab the next piece and line that up on the raw edge of fabric A2, as well as along the top edge of the paper. And then we're going to flip it over like we did before and stick it under our presser foot. Make sure none of the fabric is folded under there. And we're going to start stitching 1/4 of an inch before the line. We'll lower our needle and stitch on the line. We'll end our stitches 1/4 of an inch after the line ends. Okay, so we have that piece done, and since this is such a big piece and it's really floppy, I like to just put another dab of glue in the corner just to hold that in place while we do the next section. So we'll just smooth that out. We can press it with our iron. And now we're ready to do the next section, which is A4, the roof. So we're gonna flip the whole unit over so that the fabric side is down on our mat, and we're going to fold back the paper between section A1, A2, and A3 and section A4, because we need to trim the excess fabric here. You're going to have to pull the stitches away from the paper just a little bit. So don't be alarmed, you just want those pieces of fabric to lay flat. And so now we can just trim that 1/4 inch away from the folded edge of the paper. Then we can remove the excess fabric, and this shows us where to line up the roof piece for section A4. So you're going to take your big roof triangle and you're going to put it right side together on over sections A1, A2, and A3. And you'll line up the raw edges, and you can just have a little bit of overhang right here in the corner. And then we're just going to sew on this line, so we need to flip it over. We'll do our little sandwich, flip, stick it under our presser foot. Make sure nothing's folded under there. And then we'll start stitching. Ending our stitches 1/4 inch after the line. And then we can remove that and press it open. Okay, and I just want to trim this excess right now just to get it out of the way. And I'll probably put another little dab of glue in the corner of the roof just to secure that in place so that this isn't flapping open all the time. So we'll get our glue stick. Just put a little dab of glue out here in the corner and press that open with your fingers. So we just have one more piece to do for the roof unit and then we're done. So I'm going to put the fabric side face down on my mat and I'm going to fold back the paper on this line between section A4 and A5. I'll just pull the stitches away from the paper just slightly if needed, and then we're going to trim this excess fabric 1/4 inch away from the folded edge of the paper. Get that out of the way. And oh, my fabric's flapping again, so let me try that dab of glue one more time. Okay, now we have a nice straight edge that shows us where to line up our last piece of fabric, which is this big E rectangle. So we're going to line that up along the raw edge of fabric. We'll do our little sandwich here, flip it over and stick it under our presser foot. And we will start stitching 1/4 inch before that line. Okay, we will remove everything out from under our presser foot, press this piece open with our iron. Doesn't that look beautiful? Now we are going to trim everything up, and we're just going to use this thin black line that goes around the whole roof unit. That's our guide, and that's where we want to trim because that's what gives us our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you'll just trim through the paper and your fabric. And I think I'm going to grab my bigger ruler for these next cuts. Okay, one last cut. And then we have these awesome roof units for our house blocks. Okay, it's all trimmed up. We're gonna make 13 of these for the quilt. After you make all 13, you can remove the paper. So let me just show you how to do that really quick. You're just gonna be gentle about it, but you can just fold back the paper. And then around the outside edges of the block, I like to just use my finger to kind of hold down the stitches just to make sure none of them pull out when I'm tearing off the paper. And then you'll just kind of go around and remove each section of paper. It's kind of fun. Okay, so now we have our finished roof unit. Let's get rid of some of this mess. We can keep some of these scraps for other projects, but the rest of this I want to throw away. Okay. Next, we are going to work on the heart unit. And I have some of this all ready to go for you, but I'll make part of it with you guys. So the first step in making the heart is to draw diagonal lines on the little squares and the bigger squares. So we'll just draw a line going diagonally from corner to corner. And we're going to start with these little squares in the top corner of one of our rectangle units. All the size requirements are listed in my pattern, but we're going to place one of the little squares in the left-hand corner like so, and with right sides together, and then we will just stick this under our presser foot and stitch on the line. And then we'll just trim this and press it open. We'll trim 1/4 inch from the seam allowance. So I'm just gonna press that from the back side and the front side just to get it really nice and flat. And now we have our first corner unit, and we need to do that on both rectangles. And then we're going to take another square and line that up in the other corner with the diagonal line going that direction to make the top of our heart. And again, we'll just sew on the line. We're gonna trim and press like we did the last piece. We're just pressing towards the corner square, or corner triangle, I mean. And so that gives us this unit, and then we're gonna do the same thing for the other half of the heart. And then we're going to do the same thing in the bottom corners of the heart using the bigger squares. So this is the left side of the heart, so we're going to take one of our big squares and place it in the bottom of our rectangle like so, and then we'll just stitch on that line. We will trim and press the triangle open. So this is one half of the heart. We'll do the same thing with the other rectangle, and then sew those two units together to make the heart unit. So once we have our heart unit done, we can set this aside. And then we're going to get all the different rectangles that we've cut for our log cabin block. We're going to put the heart unit in the middle, and all of these different sizes are listed in the pattern. And we're just going to start with the bottom rectangle, sew that on, press it open, and then we're just going to work around the circle counterclockwise, sewing all the different rectangles on and always pressing out. So let's start. So I'm just going to press that open towards, or press it towards the rectangle. And then we'll sew the next rectangle on to the left side, or the right side of the heart. I'm backwards here. And then we will press that seam allowance towards the rectangle. And we're just going to keep going around making our log cabin block. It's really fun to see all these pieces come together. And when you're finished, it will look like this. And so I'm just going to set these aside. The last thing we need to do is just sew a low volume rectangle onto each side of our log cabin block, and it will match up with our roof later. So I'm going to sew those on really quick. Okay, so we're done with the log cabin part of this block. I'm just going to press the seam allowances towards my low volume rectangles. We'll flip it around and do the other side. And then we'll just, I like to flip it over and do the same thing from the front just to make sure that everything's laying nice and flat. So here we have the last unit of the block, and now we can just sew the roof unit on, and we're going to have this really fun house block. So we'll just put those units right sides together and can line up all the edges. I don't pin anything, so I'm just making sure everything's lined up. Okay, it's the moment of truth. Just clip the threads here. We'll take it over to our ironing mat and okay, now we have this fun, scrappy log cabin house block. I hope you've enjoyed making that with me today. If you want to learn more about me, you can find me on Instagram at Gigi's_Thimble or my blog, gigisthimble.com. Thanks for joining me today.